So Claude just dropped Opus 4.8 today, and your feed is about to look the same as it does every single time one of these models comes out. Screenshot of a bar chart saying it beats everything, and another screenshot saying, hey, this is the new king. And then everybody argues about it for about 48 hours, and then we all move on with our lives. And here are the benchmarks if you are curious about checking them out. Just head over to Claude's website and you'll see the new and improved stats and where Claude beats everything else. But the thing is if you're running a business or you've got a real job to do, the benchmark war is honestly the least useful part of this announcement. So there are two numbers that are really changing whether AI is useful for you this week, and neither of them is on the leaderboard. So let's skip the hype, show you what's actually changed, and compare it to something like ChatGPT 5.5 really quickly, and give you three different things you can do with this in the next few days. So Opus 4.8 came out today, May 28th, and the wild part is the last one, Opus 4.7, came out about 6 weeks ago. Now, these companies are shipping fast right now, partly because Anthropic and OpenAI are basically in a race to go public, and Anthropic just raised a pile of money at a valuation pushing $1 trillion. But you don't care about the IPO race, and neither do I. What you care about is the question that I get all the time, and that's, hey, what can I trust with this thing? What am I using this tool for? And how do I get the most value out of it? And that's exactly why this release is worth at least a couple minutes of your attention, because Opus 4.8 is not really about being smarter. On the official benchmarks, it's only a modest step up from 4.7, and even Anthropic says that out loud, which I appreciate. The real story is that it got cheaper to run fast and it got more honest. And those two things, cost and trust, are what actually decide whether AI saves you time or just creates a new thing to double check. So let's look at the first one, which is price. Now, the regular price of Opus 4.8 didn't really change at all, same as 4.7. Anthropic has added this thing called fast mode, which is basically, hey, pay a little bit more, get your answer about 2.5 times faster, which is great for when you're sitting there waiting on the AI to finish up so you can keep on moving. And they just cut the price of fast mode by about 3 times. It went from $30 and $150 per million tokens down to 10 and 50. Now, if I say per million tokens and it's making your eyes glaze over, don't worry. Really, the only translation you need is that the cost of getting fast, high quality AI work is collapsing super fast, like faster than most people are updating their mental math. I think a big reason as to why this is important is that the conversations you may have been having with yourself or your business a couple months ago, saying maybe it's too slow or too expensive, these conversations can be reevaluated now with this much lower price point. Dropping from $30 to $10 and $150 to $50 makes this much more approachable from a small business to a medium sized business perspective. The second big thing here is that it's more honest. So really, this is not something many folks are talking about. It's the one that I think matters a lot for most normal people because Anthropic is calling Opus 4.8 their most honest model yet. Now, honest AI does kind of sound like a fuzzy marketing word. So if I'm making this more concrete, for example, how sometimes you ask AI to do something and it goes, hey, I've got it all completed for you. And then you check and it didn't even do that. Or it tells you a job that's going to take 4 hours and it finishes in like 10 minutes. Or it says, hey, I updated all 50 files and then it touched only about 15 of those. Well, now that's what they went after. This is what Anthropic went after, where Opus 4.8 is about 4 times less likely than the last version to let a problem in its own work slide without flagging it. So instead of confidently telling you it's done, it's more likely to say, hey, I did most of this, but these three things didn't go through, or I'm not sure about this part, for example. Now, this is important because one of the big reasons as to why business owners I work with don't hand over real work to AI is not that it's not smart enough, it's that they don't trust it enough to stop checking. And think about it. You cannot delegate something to a person who tells you it's finished when it's not. You just end up redoing all of their work, and the same exact thing applies with AI. So there's a trust bottleneck here. So an AI that's honest about what it's actually doing and what it's unsure about is worth more to a busy owner than an AI that's 3 IQ points smarter but still is bluffing you. And honestly, this is the thing that lets you go from, hey, I have to read every word it produces to, hey, I can let this run and just spot check the parts that it flagged. That's the real unlock here, and that's where time savings are going to live with these new updates that are coming out. Now, honestly, these are from Anthropic's own evals, and they do say it a bit better. And the creators I trust are seeing it too, but there are already some early bug reports floating around, which is normal for day one. So trust it more, sure, but don't turn your brain off. Don't expect that, hey, the AI is never going to get anything wrong from now on. That's not the idea here. It's just that it's getting better at being able to just, be more of a spot check rather than a full having to review any and everything that I came up with. Now, I did want to highlight a couple of their features, with the first one being something that's been around for a little bit, but not something that I've seen many folks highlight, and that's the effort dial. Now, the effort dial is basically a simple dial that you can click and then change how hard you want Claude to work. Now, some of the other tools are adopting these simple structures as well, but it allows you to say, hey, Claude, I want you to work at a low effort on this, which is the fastest and cheapest version. Or you can say, hey, I want you to max out. I want you to be deep and slow with this and work very hard on it. And then what that does is it allows Claude to focus in much more on what you're looking to ask of it. So if you've never used these, I would highly recommend taking a peek at it and trying them out for yourself, because once you learn when and where the effort should be applied for these AI tools, you're going to get much better outputs from them. The second feature that I want to highlight is called dynamic workflows. Now, it's a bit more complicated, but basically, instead of just answering one question, Claude can now basically plan out a big project, kick off 100 little helper agents at once to work on pieces, and then check their work before handing it back. So they're using it to do huge software jobs end to end. Now, you might not be doing massive code migrations, but the direction is the part to notice. AI is moving from, hey, give me an answer to, hey, go run this whole multi step project and check yourself along the way. And that's something that's going to be applicable for many different positions, not just developers. And if you wanted to check out the Claude Code docs for yourself, they now are updated to include dynamic workflows that you can find under agents and parallel work. And this covers how to decide when to use a workflow, how to run a bundled workflow, have Claude write a workflow, and understanding how a workflow runs, and then how to be able to manage these runs as well. So there's a ton of information in here that you can look to utilize when you're looking to start using some of dynamic workflows. And the link to this will be in the description as well. So now I wanted to do the comparison that you're all looking for in terms of, all right, Opus 4.8 or GPT 5.5. Now, when it comes to how these stack up, I think Nate Herc puts it pretty well in saying that every new model wins the benchmarks. They're always going to be winning the new benchmarks. That's the marketing side of it. Now, the benchmark that matters the most is how you're actually going to be using these tools. So somebody else's use case is not going to be your use case. And the benchmarks don't always directly apply to how well does this tool work for me. Now, that being said, there is a split between the two because they do have a bit of different personalities when it comes to Opus 4.8 or GPT 5.5. Now, Claude Opus 4.8 is kind of like a diligent specialist. It's strongest on the deep, long, multi-step stuff where you really need it to stay on task and not cut corners. Complex projects, working across a lot of steps, controlling a computer or a browser to get something done. Now, it tends to be more thoughtful, a little bit more creative as well. But the trade-off here is that it can be a bit chattier and it's the pricier one to run at scale. Now, GPT 5.5 is more like the fast, efficient generalist. On a lot of tasks, it's going to get to the same place using way fewer words, something like around 70% fewer, which means it's often faster and cheaper when you're running the same job thousands of times. So for high volume, well defined, hey, just do this one thing over and over again, it's often the smarter pick on pure economics. All right, so I would recommend three different things for this week in terms of utilizing what we've talked about today. And the first would be, if you're going to be using Claude or are already using Claude, go find that effort setting and try it out for yourself. What I recommend is trying out the same different prompt or same workflow with every single level of effort and see what works well and what doesn't on every single individual level. And two, I would recommend testing for yourself Opus 4.8 versus GPT 5.5 on a task that you do on a daily basis and see how they compare. See if Opus 4.8 makes more sense for you, or see if GPT 5.5 makes more sense for you. If you've been on GPT 5.5 for a while, or you've been on ChatGPT the most of the time, then switching to Claude might not make the most sense here. The idea here is to not chase models. It's not to model chase. It's to stick with what works well for you And if something new comes along and it makes sense to, yeah, change. Otherwise, stick with what you're doing and try not to change too much, because if you're always hopping back and forth, you can get a little frustrated and you might be focusing more on what model you're using rather than am I getting work done. So I wanted to make sure I highlighted that for you guys. So if this made the whole Opus 4.8 model release make a little bit more sense for you and your actual work, do me a favor and hit subscribe. I do these videos every week, cutting through the AI noise, so you have to only care about the stuff that moves the needle for your business. Also, drop a comment below and let me know the one task that you have stopped trusting AI with. I'm genuinely curious, and I might even do a follow up testing the most common ones on Opus 4.8. Remember, the smartest model isn't always the right model. The right model is the one that you can trust with the job in front of you. I'll see you in the next one.